Before I introduce the panel, I would like to thank the Symposium Planning Committee members. So I would ask the judges of the Illinois Judicial Council, they're all seated together as they have been for lots of Saturdays before this. I would like to ask them to stand and thank them for their input and effort in putting this together. Thank you, ladies. I would also like the other Symposium Committee team members to stand, and that is the hardworking law students who have done everything, and Patricia Ramirez and Zonda Carriel, our assistants. They did the website, they did the decorations, they did the planning, the inviting, the confirmations. You have flash drives that are informational flash drives with documents on them and extra space. The students have worked all this quarter and part of last quarter to help this, to make this come together. So you know who you are, stand up. Thank you all very much. Okay. Thank you. So, and let me say, this has been, the students included, not just law students, but also social work students, because it's integral to the work we do, that we work together. So I'm not going to do a big, long introduction. I am going to let each panel member introduce him or herself. They will share with you what they feel comfortable sharing about their lives, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions. They're going to speak briefly for about 10 minutes each or so. So I just want to say two things about the people you are going to hear from. Every person seated here was involved in the criminal or juvenile justice system, and I'm not talking about retail theft. They were seriously involved in the system. They spent lots of time at the detention center, and they can tell you the rest of their journey. The only other thing I want to say is that 3 of the people at this table I have had the honor and privilege of representing, and for all 4 of these people, it is because of them and for them that this symposium is called All Our Children. I give them to you.
Hi. Okay. All right, so I'm going to sit down. So my name is Alicia Ambrose now, because I am married, but of course it was Alicia Williams. Let's see, what would you all like to know? I really don't know where to start just yet.
What was your experience going?
Okay, so some of my experiences was just, some of my experiences were more on a spiritual level once I realized what I was going through. Now, at the time when I was doing my crime and stuff like that, I was, of course, not myself, but I wasn't knowing I wasn't myself. And I am going to explain what I mean by that. Meaning I had a lot of temptations, I had a lot of just different, just like a lot of people in my head at the time, and I also was at a let me see, I'm nervous. I was at like a point in my time where I was kind of troubled. You know, I was just going through, I was trying to find myself. I was trying to find my ways. I thought my friends were my friends, so I didn't really think we would get stirred wrong. But I would like to say this, that at the time when I was going in and out, of the judicial system and things like that, I wasn't really learning what I learned after, I got out of the place. Like, I learned so much as far as just, doing what I wanted to do as far as me, myself, not letting others dictate my actions. I met a lot of great people, a lot of good resources, people that wanted the best for me when I didn't even want it for myself just of yet. I'm gonna give it a break right now. I'm gonna let you go ahead and talk to kind of get a feel of what I should be saying.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I can relate to a lot of what Alicia just expressed. You know, so growing up in an environment where it was so easy to give in to the atmospheric pressures of being something that you were not truly inside. And I think that it had a lot to do with the environment. Personally, I grew up on the south side of Chicago. Well, let me back up a little bit. Currently, I'm the senior advisor and national advocate with the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth. It's the National Coalition and Clearinghouse that coordinates efforts to end life without parole for children across the country. I've been doing this work now for the past 3 years. Prior to that, I did much with gang intervention, violence prevention. I did 5 years of research with Northwestern University as part of a longitudinal study where I had interviewed over 800 formerly incarcerated individuals to sort of, get a sense of the strengths and their outcomes and be able to inform policies and programs that were designed to help prevent children from going into the justice system. My experience with justice system began very early. In fact, my very first arrest took place when I was 9 years old. I walked into a grocery store and I couldn't resist the temptation of stealing a candy bar. A lot of that had to do with the poverty. A lot of that had to do with, of course, and like every child, unformed, brain. We know now more than ever that a child's brain is not fully formed, that the prefrontal cortex is not complete. And because of that, we rely more upon the emotional faculties of our brain, in particular the limbic system, which is more given to the emotional environment, the pressures. And that's why kids are much more susceptible to peer pressure. Well, I was very susceptible to peer pressure. And unfortunately, by the time I was 13 years old, I had 19 arrests and 7 convictions, mostly for armed robberies, aggravated assaults, weapon charges, and other gang-related offenses. At that age, to be quite honest with you, at the age of 13 years old, standing in front of a judge and being faced with severe consequences, I can honestly look back upon my childhood and recognize that at almost every engagement, whether it was an institution, an adult, even parents, unfortunately, I was always met with violence, whether it was in the school setting, whether it was in my home, a foster home, group home, whether it was at the first contact with the police or in the police station during interrogation, I was always met with violence. As a child, I can say I was never treated in an age-appropriate way. We talk much about age-appropriate treatment of children today because we are fully informed by the neuroscience, but back then, unfortunately, they regarded us as super predators, as monsters. Unfortunately, because of that, I was treated as an adult. It was really a no-brainer for the system to recognize that in their own way, that I was someone who would never change. The state's attorney said, the defendant has an extensive juvenile arrest record indicative of a violent nature, and under no circumstances should be considered for early release. Those were the last words that I heard from my state's attorney when I pled guilty. But I was fortunate not to receive a 40-year sentence or a 60-year sentence, which is what the state was fighting for. Because I had a great public defender, Herschella Conyers, I was fortunate to get far less. And because it was a day-for-day provision in our laws at that time, I was able to come out of prison at age 26 to be able to pursue a career, start a family, begin achieving other academic goals in which I was able to earn a master's degree once I came out of prison and be able to use my past experiences as a way of informing work that's being done to help hopefully create age-appropriate and trauma-informed systems that were able to make a positive difference for children and help change the trajectory of children. But I understand this particular panel is about trauma, and I will share a little bit more about those experiences as we go along. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tasha Dear. I'm kind of nervous too, but okay. Well, I entered the juvenile system at the age of 15 years old. I was charged with armed robbery and home invasion, and I was represented by Herschella Conyers. Being in, well, back when we were in the juvenile system, it wasn't as strict or it wasn't really like we were the only punishment it was the fact that we weren't home. We weren't around our families. And I'm speaking upon the Audi home. So the fact that we weren't around our families, we weren't home, we weren't able to do what we wanted to do, things of that nature, you know. And the fact that we, regardless of what crime we committed, we were still kids. So we still suffer from all the normal things that kids growing up suffer from, you know. As far as like trauma in the situation, I mean, the fact that, I mean, you do have kids committing serious crimes, and that alone, you know, causes a different mental state, you know. In my case, it was more of the fact that I was a ward of the state. I do come from a completely broken home. My father was never around, and, you know, my mother was on drugs for ever since I was possibly like 3 years old. So although I was in foster care, I was still with my family. My grandmother stepped up and took responsibility for me and my siblings. Now, her being older and, you know, her just trying to maintain the proper income to be able to take care of us, you know, although the state does provide certain things, you know, it's a lot of things that they don't cover. So her focus was mainly on just basically taking care of us. And I had no reason actually to really, you know, turn to the street, but it's just the difference, the rebellion is just like an attraction. So, you know, you're just out there, and then your friends do become your family, and that's more important than anything else, because you're not getting that love from your mom or that love from your dad, or, you know, the connection. You know, my grandmother was busy. She did all she could. It wasn't that she didn't love me, it's just that I didn't acknowledge her ways of showing me that. So I looked for it other places. My crime was, you know, family involved, you know. I actually committed a crime against my uncle. He was abusive with a lot of the female members of my family, so therefore I had formed some type of hatred against him. So that's what made me do what I did. That experience wasn't really all that brought me to the person that I am now, because even after going through the juvenile system and being tried as an adult and being transferred from facility to facility, I was released and was home possibly over a year, and I was involved in yet another crime. So that time I was actually involved in a federal crime. So I had to completely go through the federal system. So, I mean, today, I'm 36 years old. I was released from federal prison at 26, and, you know, I've been in the legal field for 12 years. I'm a paralegal. I went from Richard A. Snow and Associates, and now I'm with Mauer Law PC. I own a small catering service, and I still have no children, but I have 2 beautiful dogs, so
Nice.
I'm in a good place today. And I'm gonna pass to Derek.
Hello, my name is Derek Hardaway. I'm from the far south side of Chicago, the Rosen community, which is labeled the Wild Hundreds. Growing up as a kid, I had both parents, my mother and my father, in my life, in my home. They was married. And I never wanted or needed for anything. But like they say, the addiction to the streets, to your friends, it just pulled me in so fast I really ain't understand or know what was going on. I got involved with the gangs young, running drugs at the age of 10, which led me to selling drugs and committing crimes. And by the age of 14, I pretty much committed almost every crime you can think of, in which I was arrested for, and a lot I wasn't. But at the age of 14, that's where I committed and participated in a murder, and which led me going to prison for 22 years, in which I'm just recently released, possibly almost 5 months ago now. But through my experience, it's like I never had to do anything that I did. I never had to sell drugs, to buy the things that I want, because my family always provided for me. But it's a lifestyle. And being around the people that I label my friends, my brother, and the love that I was receiving at that time, my young man ain't really understand that that's not love. But during that time, it was an addiction that's probably more addicting than any drug you can think of. And it led me to the Audi home, the Juvenile Temporary Detention Center, where I sat for a few years, in which where I met Tasha at, and we still friends to this day. But like her, I was tried as an adult and sentenced as an adult and treated as an adult. At the age of 18, that was my birthday present, going to an adult facility where I'm around grown men that was worse than me. And far as your mind, is like you've been through into a lion's den, so you're gonna have to either become a lion or be prey. So with my experience, it made me transform into something that I wasn't and didn't want to be, in order to survive the things I had to go through to get back to here. And unlike Tasha, when I got arrested at 14, my girlfriend at the time was carrying my child. So 4 days after my 15th birthday, my son was born. And that was a different struggle, me facing the things I had to go through and be a certain type of way in order to survive, but also trying to be a father from prison. And with today's society, it's hard being a father and raising a young black man, and even harder trying to do it from prison. But over those years, I got my GED, I went to college, got an associate in liberal studies, and anything they offered as far as learning, trying to better myself, I signed up and took it, because I ain't like the person I became. It was like I sat back one day and really viewed myself and saw what I was and what I was really turning into, and was like, that's it. I gave that lifestyle up. I left the gangs alone. Since I've been home, I'm not trying to communicate with them. Don't want to see them. I don't want no powers or none of that. Only thing that I'm trying to do now is help better myself and reach out to the youth that's out here now to try to help better them. Thank you.
All right. I've got a couple of questions for every one of you. Okay. What do you, was there a moment, you've all talked about when something clicked in your head. Do you know why then?
Well, for my moment, what gave me that tremendous twist was my first child, when I was pregnant with my daughter. And I honestly was about to just drop out of school and everything. My boyfriend at the time, which is now my husband, he was telling, he had went to Lincoln Challenge, graduated and everything. And so I'm like, well, if it's that easy, I can do it too. You know, I'm pregnant, I don't want to go to school. No, he was not having that. So he made me, well, he didn't make me, he gave me the push, the drive to stay in school and, you know, graduate. And when I had my daughter and I saw her, I'm like, I gotta make sure, you know, you're gonna be somebody. You're not gonna be like mommy. You know, when I saw my daughter and holding her, it was like, you a mama, you know, it's time. Basically, everything gotta just drop. And that's when I did it. Did my 360.
So why don't you share with the audience, because I don't think they know what you're doing right now. So just tell them
Okay,
a
yeah,
little bit
because
about
I
what
did
you're
not
doing.
tell you all, because I did not know where to go with this. But so what I'm doing now, I am going to school for cosmetology. I do want to be a beautician. I didn't know that this is what I wanted to go to school for at the time, because I had so many people saying, you can do hair, you know, go to school, you're good. I'm like, I don't know if that's what I wanted to do. So throughout my entire life, you know, I've been doing people hair off and on, and I finally just said, I'm gonna just do hair. And I figured, you know, I was failing at so much other stuff, like this the gift God gave me. I have to do hair, you know? And so that's where I'm at right now. And then I go further with my career after I graduate from college.
And how old's your daughter?
My first daughter, I actually have two girls. My first one, she's going to be 6, May the 5th. And my second child, she will be 2, October the 7th. Yeah.
So Xavier, you had said, you know, you talk a little bit more about trauma. Can you or will you share what you think were traumatic experiences in your life and what you had hoped might have happened?
You know, for me, much of what I was doing as a child was, for the most part, in response to my environment. It was really unconscious. I never really felt myself in a position of having to make a decision of right and wrong. It was really just the environment that I was in. You know, and I appreciate you described the system, the juvenile justice system, the Audi home, in a way that I didn't know it. And I'm happy that things changed. I got locked up in '89, and I can tell you during that time, it was really an exacerbation of those traumas. It really was just the juvenile justice system picking up where other institutions and adults had left off in abusing and neglecting. And my first experience with the system came through child welfare. At the very age of 6 years old, I remember they came to our house. They knocked on our door, first gently and then loudly, and then eventually they forced their way in. And they grabbed my stepfather, they grabbed my mother, they took them downstairs, they slowly escorted us out of the place into the back of a squad car. And that was the first time I was in the back of a police car. And my brother, my sister, my infant sister, we were all taken away. It happened so fast, and I remember we were crying to the point where our face felt, it was just, I cried in a way that I had never cried up until that point. And I remember being taken to a place and later being placed in a foster home. And it was because my stepfather was abusing us. And there were signs of abuse. I guess the school and eventually relative did notify authorities. They thought the best thing to do was to take us away from my mother and put us inside the child welfare system. And so that experience, what should have been a very nurturing experience, in response to a very negative and toxic environment which we had came from, unfortunately was just a continuation of the very same thing. We had a foster mother, Ms. Betterman, who also had an older son that lived in the basement, but he would never speak to us. But she was very abusive. She would have us tending to these big, giant, scary dogs in her yard, picking up feces, tending to her guard. At one point, she had us chipping paint off the basement floor, and without hesitation, she would always hit us if we did something wrong, whether it was with a belt, extension cord, you name it. And so we often lived in fear. For 2.5 years, we were in fear. My brother and I, who had a mental illness, shared a room. We didn't have a television or radio. And so I tell people all the time, that was the first time I experienced solitary confinement. I had my cellie. My cellie was my brother. And, you can imagine when you have a brother who has a mental illness, he's going to tend to act out and not do things accordingly. But she didn't respond to it in that way. And so whenever something happened, whether it was a mess, whether it was too much noise, or we didn't make our bed right, she would come in and just be brutal. And so we eventually were able to go home and, make a long story short, my new stepfather wasn't much different. And eventually at the age of 11 years old, I ran to the streets. That same year when I joined the gang, unfortunately, I almost lost my life when me and my friend were playing with a gun, and the gun went off, and he shot me in my face at point blank range. And the bullet traveled through my sinus. It instantly damaged my sight on my left side. I was numb throughout. I felt blood going through the back of my throat and out of my mouth and out of my nose. I was swallowing my blood trying to survive. The police questioned me in the back of an ambulance. I lied about who shot me. And because I broke the law and obstructed justice, I was placed into the detention center for the very first time at the age of 11 years old. So when we talk about trauma and I look back upon my life, I recognize that there are many kids in the system, in particular those who are serving life without parole, much like Hardaway and many others, who not only had an underdeveloped brain or were, met with extreme challenges of pressure and growing up in very negative, non-nurturing environments, along with trauma and other ailments in life, the sad reality is that these realities are never addressed in the court. There's always a mandatory minimum, there's always an automatic transfer, there's always a situation where mitigating factors are largely ignored, and the sad reality is that the kids are painted as monsters and thrown away forever. And so that is a reality that we're contending with, that we're trying to help scale back these sentences, but unless we recognize that trauma is a determining factor oftentimes, unfortunately, sadly, we're going to continue to treat children in a way that's not appropriate. But I also would like to say that, I had a conversation earlier today, which I really appreciate, and the truth of the matter is that despite that trauma, and I think this is where we need to focus in on resilience, despite that trauma, a child can grow, mature, and become someone better, even inside the prison system. And believe it or not, even in a system that is bleak with resources and opportunity and support. I spent most of my time in solitary confinement, and yet that was still not able to stop me to grow and change and become a better person. Because the truth of the matter is that I did have remorse. The victim of my case was 14 years old. He was 1 year older than me. When he died, I ran home and I cried. And I laid on my mother's couch and I cried and cried, and I asked God to forgive me. I was instantly remorseful. This was not who I really was inside. But the sad reality is that these are the environments that these kids have to contend with each and every day, without intervention, without support. And when these outcomes happen in this way, the sad thing is that we often respond with retribution and punishment. And the most unfortunate thing is that we suddenly forget that they're children and capable of positive change.
So, Derek, let me ask you something, and I don't know you. I just met you today, so I don't know you like I know these other three. But you said something that intrigued me, which was that the gangs were like an addiction, and it just lured you in. Help us understand what that really means and feels like. It seems, I was about to say something stupid, like how could you get addicted to a gang, but how could you get addicted to heroin? So explain to us, what was the attraction for you? What did it give you?
It was the whole lifestyle. Running with your guys, the love that you was getting from them, the nightlife, the fast money, the women, the cars, the drugs. It was just very addictive.
Well, let me ask you this, okay, because you said the nightlife, the drugs, the money, the women.
Yes.
You were 14.
Yes.
Okay. So at 14, what was it that made you think you could handle the money, the drugs, the nightlife, and the women?
I mean, that was the addiction, trying to handle it. Being involved, it was like, you that guy. Most popular, everyone looking to you and following you. It's like, it's not hard to explain. For instance, like 14, I had drove from Chicago to Battle Creek, Michigan to sell drugs. At 14, I was getting into strip clubs and everything. 14, I was buying cars with my friend because he was 17 and old enough to buy them. So just having money to be able to buy the things I want when I want them and do things as an adult, but I'm a child. It was real addicting.
What made you think, did you think of yourself as an adult?
Yes.
Okay. And the gangs reinforce that?
In a sense, yes.
Did anything else reinforce that for you? And was there anything saying to you, you're a 14-year-old child?
No. Not even the courts. It's like when I did catch a case and go to court, they always threaten me. You come back, we're gonna send you upstairs for a little while. So at first, the first 2 or 3 times, I was a little nervous. Like, I don't want to go to jail. It's too much going on the streets that I want to be involved in and a part of. And I catch another case and come back and hear the same thing. And then the third time, I hear the same thing. oh, they ain't gonna do nothing. I could just do what I want to do with no repercussions, no punishment, or nothing. And even when I caught the murder, that's how I thought it was. But next court date, they gonna let me out. Next court date, they not gonna lock me up. I can't do all that time. So it ain't really sink in until the jury came back and said guilty. My man said, what they mean guilty? It's supposed to be not guilty. I was supposed to be on the streets doing what I was doing.
And how old were you when they said guilty?
I was 16.
And did you have any idea that your life had changed?
At that time, honestly, I already started changing because the things that was promised to me through the game, if this happened, you go to jail, we're gonna pay for your lawyer, we're gonna take care of your family, we're gonna be there for you. I ain't received nothing. And I'm hearing because my mother still lives in the same house when I was a child, and a lot of those same guys still around. So when I call my mother and she tell me she just saw this guy or this guy, and she asked me for money and support for me, and they keep telling her, man, we'll be right back, Miss Hardaway, we're gonna bring this to you and never come back. Oh man, I'm through with it.
Okay, so Tasha, you said that you and Derek have remained friends all this time. Were you ever gang involved?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because?
Because of family. My dad was somebody big in the game, so I kind of followed pursuit. My mom, she did a little gang banging on the fact that she was with my dad, so it was kind of the norm.
So when you turned it around, what, for all of you, seriously, what keeps that conviction strong now? What keeps you going now, saying, no, I'm done? You know, and you said you've got your children, but everybody has a dark day, right? So how do you keep pushing forward, Alicia?
I went God's way. I had to. I didn't have a choice. Like that's the only way my life did my actual 360. Because when I did try to do it on my own, I just went right back to them, right back to the friends, right back to the life, right back to whatever I wasn't supposed to be doing. But one day, first and foremost, I was raised off of church, so I knew about it. That was my foundation. So when everything failed, I turned to what I knew to come back to, and that was God. And I just told him, you know, like, I want to live right. I'm not happy, you know, after the laughs and fake smiles and stuff, and I come back home and by myself, I'm hurting in the inside because this not me, you know. So that's what keeps me going today, knowing that I'm fighting demons and temptations, and you know that's mainly what all this negativity in the world is coming from. And I feel like once everybody get on one accord and just realize that it's you, but you haven't helped. You know, you have to pray for this stuff to be away. You have to pray not to want to be in the streets, or you have to pray to not have, you know, lust of women, or just, and you have to pray for it. Whatever you want to change, you have to pray. Honestly.
Amen.
Xavier?
Yes. I can relate. You know, people often describe prison as a series of events and experiences that you see on television. I'm going to tell you right now, prison is a very spiritual experience. I've been out for 14 years now, and I can say I've never felt more connected and spiritually, aware than the time when I was in prison. You know, you see everything very blatantly. Good and evil is ever present. You see it in those around you, those who say they're your friends, those who say outwardly that they're not your friend, and in between. You know, I think that what people underestimate is that, even though you're a child and you're met with this extreme consequence, there's still a part of you that desires normalcy. There's still a part of you that, that wants to be able to live a normal life. I remember there was a program I used to watch, and I didn't have much options, to be honest with you, in prison, obviously. but there was a show called Saved by the Bell. You all remember Saved by the Bell? With Zach and Screech and, you know.
Kelly.
I used to watch that show and I used to think to myself, like, that's not the real world. Like, that's not real. Like, there's no gangs, no drugs, no violence. Like, that's Hollywood for real, you know? And their biggest concern was whether or not they're going to win the dance competition after school. Like, you know, they weren't worried about getting beat up, chased, or they had a warrant or something. But it was interesting because I thought to myself, and as I watched that show, I wondered, like, why did I like that show? It was the most corny thing. I couldn't relate to it at all. But I think as a part of me wanted normalcy. But I can relate also to a time when I was much younger and I didn't care for normalcy. I just, you know, what was normal to me was the violence. And we talk about the addiction. You know, when I used to get locked up, I had 19 arrests and 7 convictions. I was in and out of the Audi home. I used to make deals with God. I used to be like, God, I promise if you let me beat this case, I won't go to the neighborhood for 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Like, I knew not to lie, but still I would lie anyways. I thought I was being realistic. But the reality is that it was hard to resist that temptation. I would literally, I used to have a small yellow radio, and I used to put it up on the top of the glass to make it louder, to give more bass. And I used to stand on top of my bed bunk and look out into Roosevelt Road, and I used to fantasize about being free. And it wasn't because I was fantasizing about going home to my family. I wasn't fantasizing about going to Disneyland or the park or the zoo. I was fantasizing about being back on my block with the guys. We didn't have to be doing anything, because what people don't understand is that where families and other systems fail children, the gangs pick up. The gangs feel, they were a wellspring of consolation and support in my life. When I had nowhere to go, when I ran away, I slept at friends' houses. When their mom kicked us out, my friends didn't just leave me out on the streets. We used to sleep in abandoned buildings together in the wintertime. So understand, when a child is met with such adversity and their peers become their primary group, which is a natural inclination for a child, they would do anything to retain their love and respect, even if it means participating in a murder. And it's not that we're monsters, it's that the sad reality is that those needs that we had as children were severely unmet. And I think that's where the conversation should begin. How can we prevent kids from making these decisions? Well, let's first look at the most basic and fundamental needs that they have. The needs for love, acceptance, a sense of camaraderie, respect, belongingness, things that are largely ignored, but that we as a community, as adults, can be mindful of and make a difference for kids.
All right, so Tasha, let me ask you this then. What could we have done for you as a child?
Honestly, I don't feel that. I mean, it's all about the person, the individual. You know, it's not about all the assistance you get, or how many organizations help you, or it's not about all of that. It's about when you within yourself make the decision that you want to make a change in your life, that you don't want to do this anymore, because I'm quite sure we all can relate that we've complied ourselves to something, whether it's been a drug program in jail or some other program that they offered us, you know, and we needed it for some good time to get out. We did it if it qualified, you know. But it's based on when you're just ready to make a decision to change in your life, you know. And I mean, prison it doesn't change people that don't want to be changed. It doesn't. It actually helps a lot of people become even worse people, you know. It's just about, it's individual. It's individual. I mean, I don't know, like I was released, I don't know when I got home, it was just so much other stuff going on. It was like I came home in a different time, and I just got right back involved, you know. And this time it was like even a worse situation. And I used to always tell myself that if my initial case was a federal case, then I probably would not have been a repeat offender, because that's where you see people actually being completely lost in the system. That's where you see 18-year-olds getting life and never coming home. Like, the only way they get out is just like dying, you know. And it's for drugs, not murder, you know. It's for lesser crimes, and it's the punishment is so severe. So that's what, I mean, just that whole situation is what changed me and told me that, you know something?
Put your mic, bring your mic closer to you.
Is this better now?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But it was that situation that just, you know, just brought everything to the light for me. You know, the fact that I had never had a juvenile background. My first conviction, I was tried as an adult, so I don't have a juvenile background still to this day, you know. And the fact that I had that adult conviction, and then I was charged federally, and the fact that just going to jail one time pushed me to 10 years to life for being a part of a drug conspiracy. And the fact that a plea bargain was 25 years, and here it is, I'm 20 years old, no children, like, what the hell am I doing with my life now, you know? So, and I just realized that I didn't want to live like that anymore. I didn't care about, it just really became a humbling experience. I didn't care if I was down anymore. I didn't care if you liked me. I didn't care if I was the hottest girl, the hippest girl, the girl everybody wanted to be around. It made me want to, you know, be more into myself, you know, be selfish with myself, because I felt like sharing myself got me involved in so much stuff that, you know, it just, I'm just grateful that I finally woke up, you know, that it was, I didn't get to a point where, you know, like my mom, you know, she's 53 years old and she's still in and out of the system, you know. So I'm just grateful that I finally woke up.
Okay. I'm gonna open it up and see, are there questions? We've got a few more minutes, and then I'll ask each one of them for a closing comment. But is there a question anyone wants to ask? Oh, anybody? Oh, yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
I guess when you're talking about addiction, and I was a very young mom myself, and I found that a lot of it has to do with being an adolescent. Did you find that you just wanted to be cool? Was that the part of the addiction? Like being out and going to the streets and being part of your friends? Is that really what it is? Is that what we're missing when we're young? Is how do you become part of a group without being involved in gangs and drugs? Because I think at the end of the day, you just want to be part of a group. And when you're living on the streets or you're living in inner city, you don't really have that many options. Is that something that you guys found? That's just the only place that you can find being cool is being cool with the people who were involved in drugs. Do you think if you had a different setting, maybe like Saved by the Bell kind of setting, you wouldn't have gotten involved in drugs?
You know, it's interesting you say that, because, I mean, you look at, I mean, every child's going to go through some developmental challenges, you know. I have she'll soon to be 6-year-old daughter, and the fact of the matter is that every child has needs, and these needs are very much in sync with the way in which the child responds to their environment and the way in which their brain is formed. And so, you know, a great parent is someone that's able to recognize those challenges, to fill in those gaps, address those needs, and help keep that child safe during that most impetuous and risk-taking time of their life. And how do you do that? You do that by providing, you know, programs, activities, some structure, you know, a positive reinforcement system, something there to help. I look at like between the age of, I would say 11 to like 18, it's like a black hole. Anything can happen there, right? It is such a destructive age. Even if you're not growing up in a gang-infested, drug-infested environment, you're still very susceptible to ditch schools, you know, to get high and do simple things in the neighborhoods that are even very well resourced, and you know, and even if you live in a very positive environment, you know, the reality is that there are some kids who are serving life without parole who came from wonderful, loving homes. You know, but it didn't take much because of their underdeveloped brain to fall prey or to fall victim to the influences that exist out there. You know, just think about this, for example. You know, during the time of my growth, and even in the time of, you know, Mr. Hardaway's growth, I remember the thing we listened to was Eazy-E, Ice-T. This was the music that was, playing in our ears. These words were consistently there. And as an adult, I'm gonna keep it real. I listen to gangster rap every day. I don't like love songs. I don't get into all that. Like, I just focus. That's what I love. But it doesn't influence me as an adult the way it influenced me as a child. When I hear that, to me, it's more like, yeah, I'm gonna kill that term paper. It registers differently. But the fact that I'm trying to say is that when you're a kid, you are so impressionable. And I think that you're right. Had we had a better, environment, had we had, much, even when we engaged the system, had they been aware, unfortunately they were not aware during that time, of how children, are very much, risk-taking. These are natural behaviors. We've criminalized adolescence as a whole, to be quite honest with you, and I think that that's where we should start looking at. So,
Judge Mendoza?
This question is for Mr. Hardaway. You said you really, because you had never been locked up, you just kept getting let out. I'm assuming you were put on probation. Is that?
Well, it was, I never been on probation. I did have supervision. It was a form of probation, but without a probation officer.
Because I'm just wondering, this movement sort of justice, we try to obviously misuse alternative. So as judges, we're doing maybe supervision, given you case, we're doing probation, some of probation, we'll give you another chance on probation, then maybe we'll give you intensive probation, and then maybe eventually you'll go to PJJ. And I am, not that I want to undo all that, but I am wondering, do you think if you had something that happened quicker, that it might have deterred you? Because I have to say, what I've seen recently is kids who had automatic transfers, who were sitting locked up for 2 and 3 years, more respectful and obedient to children I can never see. Now that they've been remanded back to us, and put them on EM, I released them, but I put them on EM, to date, I've yet to put anyone on a violation. It does make me question if the impact were harsher at the beginning, do you think it would have been a greater deterrent to continue, for children?
The question, as I understand it, is that Derek had said he had never had any consequences and had never been locked up. And Judge Mendoza's question is, maybe if you had had harsher consequences or detained earlier, would that have deterred you from doing ultimately what you got locked up for?
It possibly could have. It's hard to say yes, because my young self at the time, regardless if I would have went to jail for a few months and got right back out, I don't think that would have been significant enough for me to change at that age. But if I would have been punished, maybe it would have slowed me down a little bit. I wouldn't say it probably would have changed my young self back then, but it would have helped. I really believe it would have helped. Because by constantly catching cases and going to court with no punishment, I felt like I couldn't be touched. I can do what I want to do with no consequence.
I
want to say this though. It's like I used to get in trouble through my parents, especially my father. It wasn't no whoopings and no belt. He told me, you want to be a man and act like a man, I'm going to beat you like a man. So when my father punished me, it was fist to cuff. And to this day, I can't even count how many fights I've been into with men bigger and stronger than my father, and I haven't met a person that hit me harder than my father. But from that, some of the things that I do, first thing come in my mind, man, my father found out about this. So with that punishment, and like you said, judges, if they get punished before or if they do anything else, it's gonna register in their mind what's to come if they get caught for it. So that alone would be beneficial and helpful.
There are lots of hands up. I'll just...
First of all, thank you all for coming. It's really important that we have discussions like this, but my question is for Mr. Derek. You mentioned that you had a child,
Yes.
and I'm just thinking of all the trauma that young people today, especially young black people today, are facing. Do you have a relationship, and this is a question you don't have to answer, but you mentioned it, so I just wanted to ask, do you have a relationship with your child and the mother, and how has that affected you, since you've been out for 5 months now? Do you still have a relationship? Did you keep a relationship while you were in? Yeah.
Yeah, we have a good relationship. Like, that's my man. We super cool. His mother, me and his mother, super cool. She used to bring him out to see me all the time, as well as her other daughter that I've raised as well from prison, so that's my baby too. And my son is not in Chicago. He's in Iowa, but my daughter is, she's here. And even through prison, just the visits and communicating and writing and things like that, I tried to stay as consistent with him all while I was in. And now even more that I'm out.
Thank you all for being here. My name's Ashley Kirkwood. I'm a litigator at a firm in Chicago. I heard you say that if you would have gotten a harsher sentence, it could have potentially deterred you. Because in this room we have judges and litigators and public defenders and people that could potentially impose harsher sentences on babies and children, I just want to know, other than a harsher prison sentence, what can we do to help you before it gets to that point, right? Because I personally do not believe that a harsher sentence on a child is what we in this room should focus on to then deter future crime, right? What we want to do and what we want to learn from you is how can we prevent, how can we be a net before the prison system has to get involved? And my sister Dear, I know you said maybe it's an individual thing, but I can tell you that environment matters a lot. Having a mom can change things. Having a father can change things. Having stability can change things. So help us to learn what we can do, what programs we can provide, what signs we can address before it gets to the prison system so that we can not impose harsher sentences earlier, but provide preventative remedies in lieu of maybe supervision. What would have been more impactful than supervision other than us throwing a child in jail? Because we got judges here, y'all.
Yeah.
Hold on, wait a minute.
So we don't want to have judges
know.
leaving.
And that's why I want to clear that
As
up.
a litigator, right? My pro bono practice is representing inmates, and I can tell you right now, none of my clients would say that a tougher sentence would have helped them in the beginning, okay?
I got the whole
So
legal
I just want to
system that's
know.
looking at me like, man, what's wrong with you? I'm not saying.
I'm sorry. I mean, and we're recorded, brother. We're recorded, right? We're recorded. We
I'm
just
not
wanna
saying.
help me help you.
extended
You know what I'm
prison
saying?
sentences. I'm not saying just extend the prison sentence, just throw them up. I'm saying some form of punishment should be taken. I'm not saying just they do something, just lock them up and send them away. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that a person should be held accountable in some type of way. If it's community service, anything like that, that's cool too, but some form of punishment should be there. And when I was a child, we used to have the after-school programs. And that stopped, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. I saw on the news they closed 55 schools in Chicago. That's like ridiculous. It's a lot of teachers. My mother's a teacher, my girlfriend's a teacher, and it's a lot of teachers that our children spend hours with weekly that don't care, that ignore them, things like that. So it's just not the home, it's the school as well. After school programs to keep kids off the streets a few more hours. Once they stop the after school programs, as far as me, I couldn't wait till 2:30 comes so I can be gone. And sometimes 12 o'clock, I'm gone because I want to get back to the streets. But it's not just the family, your household, it's the schools, it's the community that all needs to step up and take a part in helping these children and being there, making sure they get to and from safely. Because as a kid, I still remember, especially a young kid, the parents being out on the porch, everyone knew each other. Boy, I'm gonna tell Miss Hardaway on you, you quit throwing them rocks and things like that. So Now it's like, if you say something to someone else's child, the parents not looking or caring if their child was bogus or busting these windows or stealing this car. Don't say none to my baby, don't do that or none of that, and the parents want to fight. So the child seeing this, and this is what they think is correct behavior and what they grow to be like their parents. So I'm not saying just lock them up. Let me make that clear. I ain't saying that. I'm saying
I think we've sort of answered that question in the past couple of decades. You know, the greatest conviction of our children as a whole, in particular those engaged with the justice system, is when they said that they were fatherless, godless monsters, right? They said that they were super predators, that they would never change, that they need to be met with punishment and consequence swiftly and without regard to their adolescence and their youthfulness and their potential. Obviously, that wasn't the best approach. That was a very ill-informed approach. I can tell you something, I was met with extreme consequence at each and every situation. Remember, my very first incarceration was because I refused to tell on my friend who shot me. You know, I was pretty much locked up for my own shooting. Come on, think about it. Like, how much more severe can you be? You know? But the sad reality is that didn't work. That did not work. When I was in the system, there was also additional consequences. If we messed up in the TV room, we were forced to face the wall for hours. We would stand there with our hands behind our back. Do you remember that?
Toes and nose on the wall.
For hours. You have to look at the cement. I can still envision those bricks. I know exactly the pattern of those dots to this very day. The smell of that wall. I had to face that wall for hours. Talk about punishment. When the staff had a problem with me, he didn't like me, he would walk out that door at the end of his shift. And he wouldn't even let me off the wall. Which the unspoken norm was that I would have to stay on that wall until he came back the next day. When I came back from court, when I knew that I was going to plead guilty and I was having a hard time because they were throwing all these numbers out there, I came back to my section, Section 4E, the county section, came in looking visibly sad, and a substitute staff that was there allowed me to go make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich because he said the lunch was horrible. The staff, our normal staff walked in, Mr. J came in, and he got upset because he thought I was taking advantage of the new staff. And he told me to get on the wall, and I refused to get on the wall. When I refused to get on the wall, he called Mr. Johnson. They tried to convince me I refused to get on the wall. And then Ms. Trotter walked in, a very loving, caring staff. She was a wonderful woman. She was one of the people that I can actually say, looking back in the detention center, who really cared. And when she grabbed my arm, I couldn't even so much as pull my arm from her. That's how much love and respect I had for her. And she gently and slowly walked me back into the solitary confinement. Understand, we respond to adults in situations in ways that are normal for us. If you come with aggression, anger, resentment, retribution, we're going to respond with anger, sadness, anger, resentment, retribution. We're not, especially when you grow up in that environment. That's what we're taught to do. But if you love us, if you care for us, you give us other options, alternatives, provide us with meaningful opportunities to be able to get out of that cell, get into an education program. Mr. B was one of the greatest teachers I ever had, not because he taught me everything that I needed to know, but because he had trail mix. And he would always give me trail mix in class and say, here, Xavier, don't tell nobody I gave it to you. It's those small things that make a difference for a child that reminds them that they're human. If you want a child that behave like a human being, remind them of their humanity.
All right. Let me just thank this panel. This is the beginning of a conversation that we need to have with our children, even as they are our adult children, to help them understand, but their voices needed to be heard. I thank all three of you and Tasha for bringing Derek also. I am proud of them. They are part of us. They are part of our community. I hope we develop ways where we can all come together again and help their children. Thank you.